Our Monday morning here in the US, Monday afternoon to those of you in Europe, and now is now wherever you happen to be on the globe in this beautiful beta world that we live in. This morning, our topic is going to be licensing, and in the terms of open source beta is what I called the title of this episode, and why is openness important? And OpenSpace Beta being the first entry into that realm in this context for our place and our discussion time. And with me, of course, is my friend and partner in crime, in virtue. How about that? Niels Pflaeging. Niels, how are you this fine open morning?
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm good. I already had a client, just had a client meeting on another one of these open source concepts, cell structure design. So that was fun. Yeah, and now let's talk a little bit about concepts. Licensing, that sounds very boring, right? As a topic.
Yeah, I kind of thought, well, should we talk about it like that, or should we bring in something exciting? I thought, but what are we talking about? So the genesis. Why did I think this is important? One reason was that, well, we had the event back in June, with Daniel and you and Silke and myself, about that. It's been 5 years that OpenSpace Beta has been in the world and was birthed as a derivative work from OpenSpace Agility and Prime OS. Underneath that is Daniel Mezek's work, and he made the decision back in 2015, 2016 to do the OpenSpace Agility model framework, whatever we want to call it, the intervention method, as the Creative Commons CC BY SA, the share alike licensing, which means, for those of you who out there who may be watching this don't know, that means you can, with attribution, share and create derivative works of the named work, in this case OpenSpace Agility, as long as you give attribution, and can make commercial use of that work, which I think is very important.
Yes.
And why does that matter? And I think that was also the question. Why does openness matter? Well, in the Agile world, SAFE's not very open. there's you can't use that. You have to train it with the DEX. You have to license it, and you have to pay a perpetual license to do those things. Scrum Alliance while the Scrum Guide is, I don't believe it is open source with the Creative Commons license, but there's this complex around that, and that the idea of doing Creative Commons licensing is fundamentally different. So that's the frame in terms of this openness and being able to share with attribution seems like a great idea. What was it for you back in? I know we went over this a little bit back in June, but why was that so appealing to you in terms of your work? And we'll talk about now as OpenSpace Beta, but I want to talk about how you have brought that to the other pieces of the work, the system.
Yeah, I think the history goes back to Beyond Budgeting, which was not open source and is not open source. And when I joined the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable in 2003, the model was already, the Beyond Budgeting model or approach or social technology was already developed. That was all good and well. There was a community, but it was very closed shop. So you couldn't, some things were published and public, but other things weren't. So there was always something a little secretive around it.
Yeah.
And annoyingly, I thought, a little unnecessary secrecy. Also, there was this thought that, well, we have a paid membership. There was an annual membership fee for companies to subscribe. So we cannot give everything to the others. We must have, benefits for the community. And so this wasn't really open source, and for reasons good or bad. And this model had its price. And one of the prices was that it wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't advancing. So when we created the BetaCodex network, at the beginning, we called it Beyond Budgeting Transformation Network, but then we quickly rebaptized it into BetaCodex Network. We always knew that it had to be open source because we had seen the disadvantages of a closed model Also, one of the disadvantages of beyond budgeting was that clearly it made the directors or the leaders of the community dependent on that pitiful membership income. So it created incentives to not do proper research, to run the community, but to kind of reap benefits from the community and so on. Not that anybody, nobody had a bad intention, I think, in our circle or in our directorship, in our group, but still there were all these kinds of lame, the kind of stifling effects of closed membership and possession and so on. Yeah. So the idea of the BetaCodex network was, okay, we have to open this up. Open source was already a thing. So we said, okay, BetaCodex is open source. At the time, we didn't use the Creative Commons license because, quite honestly, I was ignorant of that, really, how it worked. So we added this later, when 5 or 6 years ago, when we came in touch with Daniel Messick. So we kind of said, okay, oh my God, we haven't, why aren't we not using Creative Commons licensing? So we added that, but it was always on the website and clear, and I made this clear in all my conversations and in all my presentations that this was open source. No. And so, of course, 5 or 6 years ago, we started adding those other social technologies on top. So instead of just having beyond BetaCodex, we added OpenSpace Beta. The next year, we added cell structure design. Then 2 years later, we added relative targets. Now we have, it's like a kind of a licensing portfolio, or portfolio of social technologies that everybody can use. And of course, that means that all the tools and concepts need to be open source as well. They need to be shared.
Yeah. So
that's liberating.
Well, yeah,
that's the idea. It's liberating, right? It keeps you from earning your income from clients, not from potential, from friends or colleagues. I don't have to grab your dollars, Ryan, because the idea is that we share the conceptual stuff, and we should all, allow each other to have, and enable and help each other to have income, instead of ripping each other off with certifications and toolism.
And the incentive to denigrate your colleagues and that unhealthy competition, based on, oh, this is my intellectual property. No, if you use that, that takes away. That's the scarcity mindset, right?
Yes.
Or the view of scarcity that, oh, we there's only so much in the world, and I have to get mine.
Yes.
And you're taking from me. I'm gonna take you to court because you used my diagram improperly.
Yeah.
And you made $10 off that diagram.
Yeah.
I am so afraid. I'm so afraid of you, of others, and I'm like, oh, and maybe that's a bit of self doubt or what have you in there too. But that's just all those feelings and that energy. It just goes away when you say, we've created this and we are going to bring it to the world and use it to help the people we care about. And if you want to use it, that's great. All we ask, and that's the agreement. All we ask is that if you do use it, you make a derivative work, that you give us credit, acknowledge us, and that we acknowledge each other. So seems like a no-brainer.
Very important. The opposite of open source is that you create an inward focus where you try to forge a community that you can rip off and kind of like when you make butter, you kind of try to pull the cream off all the time, and earn from each other. And that's why I think most of those communities are toxic. Take holacracy or sociocracy or all these agile concepts. I mean, every feeble agile scaling, they're also feeble. They are all just different. I mean, and then the newest one is called the most different of all, and the most different of difference, and the most colorful. Today I was made aware of a annual conference somewhere of Unfix, and that's just ripping off colleagues and peers and doing qualification stuff all over again. So it's a choice, really, a business model choice as well. How do you want to earn your money? What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be earning money with colleagues? You put that very well, I think, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's a profound difference in direction. Do we want to make money off qualifying and controlling colleagues and getting a share of things like your 10%? of your sales because you are qualified and you can show your or your annual fee. And all these, of course, it has it comes with a cost, right? Like testing at school, testing children at school, it comes at a cost. And certifying a community comes at a cost of being inward focused and not applying these things to clients, to the world, really, closing it off. So open source is the way to do that. But open source then again comes at a price too, that ultimately you need to attract people who want to put something in as well and contribute something. And that is, of course, it's not so easy. It's not automatic that everybody comes in and says, oh, yeah, I have something to add. It doesn't happen.
And this is the interesting part. There's some there's two curiosities here, but one would be about what was the negotiation, again, not to reveal anything specific about when you were talking with Daniel about how, if we make this change or that change, did you talk with him about the kinds of changes you were making? Did you consult with him about that? Or did you just, here's our derivative and we're going to attribute this to you, but there wasn't a dialogue. So was there a dialogue about the licensing around that time?
Yes, that's a brilliant question, by the way, because the open source license says you do not have to consult us, you just have to cite the source, quote the
attribution,
proper attribution, which is defined in the license, and keep the derivatives or creations open source. Yeah. So in principle, and I think we fall into this programming, and I did so too when Silke and I had this idea in Maine of deriving OpenSpace Beta from OpenSpace Agility. Our first impulse was, okay, there is this license. We already had seen the license, right? But we said, before we start anything, we have to talk to the guy, right? He's here. We're in the same hotel, so we had dinner the previous day. So we sat with him and asked him and told him, okay, we have this plan. This is what we want to do. This is why OpenSpace Agility is not what we want to use. We need to make changes. Can we do that? And he kind of agreed, but he didn't know what was coming. I mean, Silke, during the famous lobster dinner, Silke had warned him that when I start working on something, I can be very fast. So she had warned him of that I could make something that he wouldn't, that he would be surprised. And it was like that. So I had another conversation with Daniel when a few weeks after the main encounter. And I told him again, okay, this is our plan. We want to call it OpenSpace Beta. We know that now. It will have some features that are this and this and this and these things that. And he said, yeah, go with it. And then I told him at the time as well, I looked at all your material, the handbook, but there's also this website, and the material on the website, some of it is better than in the handbook. So I would like to take text from the handbook online and offline, remix it and use it for our handbook. Is that okay as well? Because I understand it's you took years to write this shit, and I will just, can I copy it? Main parts and improve it. And he said something like, yeah, I mean, it's the license, I have to, even if it sounds, if it feels strange, I still have to do it because it's a license. All the written materials can be used, So, but I informed him, I told him, I asked him for permission. And I think that's a polite thing to do, right? Yeah. So we asked him, and then what was interesting, when we had the handbook ready 2.5 months later, I sent him the PDF file or something, or I'm not sure if it was a pre-print copy or a PDF file, and he was kind of shocked. And he told
that you already had it, right?
Yes, and of course he recognized what was his writing in it, or derived what were the roots, of our book, and he didn't like it. On an emotional level, he didn't like it, but then again he said, yeah, but it's open source, so what can I do? And it's okay, there's proper attribution. And we had discussions about him writing a preface for our book, a chapter, and how we should mention him in which. So I asked him for our handbook specifically, where should we mention you? Do you think this is enough attribution or not? Because I think this proper attribution thing, it's also a relationship thing. It's a question of if you want to have a relationship with the original creator. And I wanted this, and I still want it, and I appreciate Daniel. So we had conversations about, the preface and where the thank you would go and in which form and where to thank and how to thank the other authors of OpenSpace. We had several conversations, and there was always something like on his side as well, the emotion. Do I feel okay with that? And that's part of this open source game, right? Of course, it feels very strange when people come up with great ideas, and I think ours was a good idea. OpenSpace Beta is a good idea. I'm sure of that. So you, as a creator of the original version, or the previous version, the previous iteration, of course you feel like, okay, this is strange. They're just taking my shit.
Yeah, this is my thing. And if you had sold that and it was copyrighted, right? I mean, that's the difference, right? Are you going to copyright this and do your registered trademarking and go through all the governmental stuff that you have to do to make that happen? Which I don't know how that's different in Germany.
No, there is trademarking. I mean, we have the brand, OpenSpace Beta brand is protected, and through publishing a book, you also kind of get a copyright. But still, that doesn't mean that you do not have to license it to other people.
So and
it's this ambiguity of you create something and then you let it go so that others can build something beautiful with it. And this conviction, I mean, Daniel showed at the time, Daniel showed to us how it works, and we then applied the same idea to cell structure design and relative targets as well. So it taught us a lot. It taught me a lot, I must say. Yeah.
Which brings me to the next inquiry and curiosity for me is that yes, so the book and the model that, I mean, the pathway from OpenSpace Agility Prime OS to OpenSpace Beta is pretty well defined. Now then you've gone put the BetaCodex, relative targets, and cell structure design also in that license.
Yes.
So
they each have a separate license, but it's the same for all of them.
Well, yeah. Each has their distinct Creative Commons license. So what do you envision happening, say, with the 12 principles, right? So what is inclusive of the principles that could be derived? What would be in bounds and what would be out of bounds? I think from your perspective, I think it's very interesting, and not just for BetaCodex and the 12, the laws and the principles, but for your works in general. What would you consider out of bounds?
That's a great question. I think nothing is out of bounds, right? In principle, nothing is out of bounds. The question is just how nicely you ask what you can do. because I mean, we did this booklet together, right? It was just published a few months ago.
Mm-hmm.
That should certainly be within the license. No, it's a derivative or a thing that is the BetaCodex, just a little bit more in detail explained, and we turn it into a booklet. Mm-hmm. In principle, that's it. Of course, that is it's to be shared, right? Because the license includes documents and illustrations and other prefabrications, concepts. So I mean, I think we have to sell the booklet. It cannot be for free, from my point of view. So we have to commercialize it for an accessible price. But it's a product that we derive from the license. It's part of the open source license, and that's written in the booklet as well. So. Now, I wouldn't want anybody to just copy it and give it away, or share it online. There's still some ethics around this. But of course, if somebody said, "Oh, I want to write a better booklet, can I have yours as a model?" Of course. Yeah, why not?
Well, and see,
but of course, you have to come up. I sometimes wonder why so few people come up and ask. Thanks.
Well, that's and it's part.
I wonder if anybody else has ever asked Daniel for license.
That's interesting. I went on whatever it was in, I don't know if it's my Kindle Unlimited or whatever it was. There are actually books on the Kindle marketplace that say OpenSpace Agility. Like there's 3 or 4 books by people that are not
in Germany. In Germany?
No, I mean there were English language books that were different. Now again, I
wonder if those people asked Daniel for, because I think it's good manners. Open source is not supposed to substitute good manners. It's supposed to substitute theft and ripping off each other and being closed shop. But it's not supposed to supplant or substitute good manners and ethics. I think we should still talk about. I mean, I thought it was wonderful to talk. I had a couple of wonderful conversations with Daniel about his creation, because I also wanted to understand the dynamics, how it happened, and so on. And I always try to explain to him, we are not just copying OpenSpace Agility and calling it differently. I always try to explain to him, this is how this will be substantially different. Sometimes people wrote to me or told me, OpenSpace Beta is just the same as OpenSpace Agility. That just shows that those people have not looked at the two concepts.
Haven't read the book, yeah.
Yeah, because of course, the interesting for anybody seriously interested in concepts, the comparison between the two concepts would be the most interesting. By the way, our second edition of the handbook, we changed a lot. I never changed so much between the first and the second edition of the OpenSpace Beta book. It's very different now. Not visually, it looks the same pretty much, but conceptually we changed a lot. We took some let's say, Daniel Mesick stuff out again, and got some of our own articulations in, and changed some conceptual insights. And that, of course, that didn't require me to talk back to Daniel, but in the first round, we went very far at borrowing stuff and then leaving some stuff out and adding different stuff in. And I tried to explain to him, look, this is we're not just changing the name, there's conceptually something different. And I think explaining this was important for our relationship as well.
Sure. So, for example, let's say someone says, "Oh my God, I've read the brochure, I've read OpenSpace Beta. I want to bring the principles into something, and I want to do my own booklet." Right. Let's say I want to do, I want to call it. I want to call it. I don't want to call it the BetaCodex. I want to call it the Bob book or something like that. So to completely rename it, and there's 12 principles in there. They are the principles, but again, that's the question: how different can they be? And if they're so different, is it even okay to do an attribution? And that's maybe that's the dance. And I think that and for me, I'm thinking, if you feel so drawn to the principles and you want to share something about it, I would think it would be wonderful to say, hey Niels, I love this stuff. I want to do A, B, C, D with it because I want to do this. And I'd like to call it my own thing for my own reasons, but I will be absolutely sure to give you credit attribution per the license. So how does that land with you? If Bob creates a Bob book and it looks, sounds, and feels like the BetaCodex and it's got an attribution on it, is that
yeah.
in balance?
Those are serious questions. Do you have a stance on that?
Well, my stance is that if there's a conversation, right? Let's say, oh God, I'm trying to think. The BetaCodex comes to mind because it's, we've talked about some of these things about in the brochure, how it was tacked and groove. Tacked. And we talked about it, and then ended up changing something in the brochure to tempo, which that I actually learned later, because tact time in Lean is actually a very specific thing, and I think that's why you put it in there like that.
Yes, at Toyota they use the term tact. In Japan, they use the German word tact.
Yeah, and so for me, I think. I would think it's okay as long as I'm saying, here's the way I understand the principle. Here's again, flow coordination or federalization is, or what do you mean by connectedness with purpose? Maybe in my audience, in my world, maybe that's they want to hear something different, and I want to bring that concept to them in a language.
And we had some conversations around these things, you and I.
Yeah. And I guess the thing is, what's my stance? I think if there's a conversation, and if it's a real conversation, and you sense the respect, I think the respect for the concepts, that the naming of them doesn't necessarily need to be completely in line, and that the articulation is a detail, it's a semantic detail.
Yes.
But But if you have the conversation, that's good manners and that's ethics.
Yes, but I would like to add another thing. I agree, but I would like to add another facet to the game.
Okay.
I mean, open source, it's a real mind fuck, I think, because it allows you to create. But here's the thing. I think there's not enough creation around. There's not even enough ideas around. That's my personal opinion, okay? So not many people have relevant ideas that turn into relevant innovations, increments, improvements, new models. I say this. I have met a couple of people who have created a lot. The first maybe who I met was Gebhard Borg, a guy who was instrumental in founding the BetaCodex network. Now we don't have a strong relationship anymore, but at the time we worked together. We did client projects together, and we founded, like, ending also history with the Beyond Budgeting Roundtable. We started the BetaCodex network together with Valeria as well, right? And this guy, Gebhard Borg, he could just create a method just like that. Yeah. So we had a client problem, and he said, let's do this and that. And I never knew, is it his idea or did he get it somewhere? But he really had these ideas, like creating little interventions, tools, and then we would talk about it, you know. So another guy whom I met was Ernst Weichselbaum, who created his own systems approach, and his own lean approach, the Weichselbaum system, as he calls it, his own system. And some people might say, this is nothing new, but it is new. The guy really created this, and he created his own language, conceptual ideas that then we adopted for cell structure design. For example, some of the stuff in cell structure design, like the about the interconnections, interfaces, so to speak, between cells, we borrowed those concepts from the Weichselbaum system. Of course, we borrowed other stuff from Toyota and so on. Yeah. So this world of open source is about borrowing from each other, but it also means that, for example, you criticizing the vocabulary in the BetaCodex, that's just wonderful, because the discussion we had about tact and
tempo.
Tact and tempo, yes, and we, of course, you convinced me to leave the word tact behind and opt for the term tempo, because it's more American and more
it's rhythm, tempo, and groove. That concept together is like, as opposed to just arbitrary quarterly, annual, semi-annual.
And of course, tempo in German means something different. So that's why I had rejected the term tempo before, because it's something like a false cognate, between English and German. So, but here's the thing. Now, you could have said, I have this new concept. It's still the same 12 points, but this word is not tact, it's tempo. So it's my concept. But I would have rejected that. That's not deriving anything. It's not adding a new idea. It's just articulating the same idea differently. So if somebody asked me, I'm thinking about creating my own BetaCodex, which would be called the Otto or the Michael or the Gem Codex, I would just say, where's
Sally
your idea?
Codex?
Exactly. We can all have our own, the Jesus Codex or whatever codex. Yeah. And that is not creation. I mean, just changing a word is not a derivative or an improvement or a different thing. There need to be proper ideas. That's why I said earlier that when I talked to Daniel Mazik about this, OpenSpace Beta becoming a sibling of OpenSpace Agility, dedicated to a different problem, because OpenSpace Agility is about bringing about Scrum and Kanban teams, large scale, right, without coercion. But OpenSpace Beta is to transform entire organizations with all kinds of department structures, whatever industry. So it's a different game. And I had to explain to him, or we had to, Zika and I, we of course, we felt obliged to explain to Dan, look, it's not a copy. This has a different use, and you can be proud, because without your OpenSpace Agility, or Prime OS, as he calls it often, we would never have come up with the same idea. Still, it's something very different, and you can see it here. And I explained to him. And of course, I sent him the first manuscript as well, so he looked inside it and acknowledged that it's different, substantially different. But this is very crucial. I mean, the first step with BetaCodex, I hope, will always be that people come up, like you did, and saying, I would like to improve this thing in the BetaCodex. Here and there. I don't want to make it mine. I just want to add something, contribute. That's the beauty of open source, I think. Then if you create something entirely different, okay, then you can call it the Otto Codex. But that would have to possess a different idea, an additional idea. Does that make sense?
So, yeah, that makes sense. It actually came to mind when you think about the prime example of open source in the world is the Linux operating system.
Yes.
So there's Linux distributions, and that there were countless and still countless additions and changes and fixes to that common stream. I mean, you still call it for Ubuntu, for example. You use the Ubuntu distribution, which was based on another distribution, based on another distribution, and that comes through, and all the different components, and that there are so many people contributing to the features and additions to it. Now, again, I don't know specifically how the mechanics of it and how they do the management of the source code. But yeah, so there's a couple different things that are going. There's one, creating a new distribution, and there's two, there's an opening to make modifications or suggestions or enhancements to I would say the trunk or the source. So that's the dance. Well, how different does it need to be for me to say, oh, I'm going to make the Rijon codex, and that it's got 12 principles, but it's got 3 more different whatever it is. So intervention 2, intervention 3, intervention 4, or something like that, which is different. Or I want to propose a different articulation or an enhancement to the existing 12. Those are total different things. Is that, in your mind, is that still inclusive of the Creative Commons licensing?
I mean, it's the open source license is nothing more, I think, than how you set up the system of improvement or advancement of something, right? If you, for example, if you have the Scrum guide, it's probably just those guys being authorized to review it. In BetaCodex, there could be other mechanisms. We don't even have a mechanism. It's pure agreement. So anybody could revise the BetaCodex in principle. Of course, I would have my opinion in Circle as well. We did the last revision, but we could agree on any kind of process. And certainly, I do not own the BetaCodex. It's out there. So. Yes, the first thing an open source license provokes is for people to join in, I think, and to accelerate the development. I always wanted this to be a thriving community, and it could be more thriving. From my point of view, there could be more disruption conceptually and more advancement. I would like a different version of the BetaCodex being done every year, at least. I wish. But there haven't been so many ideas, right? I would love to hear more ideas from other people.
Well, what do you think those ideas would look like? What is there a cure? Well, again, I'm telling you to tell someone else with their ideas.
I've thought about 12 plus 5, 12 plus 6, and adding transformation principles, for example. That was one thought that I always had. But I think nobody would give a fuck, so I haven't seriously suggested it for the last couple of years. Now, I mean, and of course, from that came the idea of very fast organizational transformation. There's a white paper on that, and OpenSpace Beta includes these principles. Yeah. So they come up, these other principles, the 12 plus 5, the plus 5, they come up in OpenSpace Beta a couple of times. And then we added if you look at the concept overviews of OpenSpace Beta and cell structure design and relative targets, you see that there are other principles appearing there.
Yes. Right. Exactly.
So could people derive from that, add to that? Yes. I think nobody has ever made a suggestion to those concepts, how we should tweak them or improve them. Nobody has ever, which is fine, of course, but I could imagine more innovation, So and the idea is, of course, people could add to all these concepts. People can skip in with their ideas. And we would welcome this, both Silke and I, we would love this. But also people could develop more social technologies. When we thought of those 3 social technologies, OpenSpace Beta, cell structure design, relative targets, we thought also, what would be the 4th? We don't know it yet, but what could be a 4th? We came up with learning circuits by Red 42, a learning technology that then has been used or is used by Comenius, our own learning company. But there could be more of these concepts, right? And always the question is how many licenses do you want to have or create, and how many communities, how much speed is coming there. And it could be much more. I hope there would be much more influence coming from others, or input from others.
Pushing the boundaries, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are no strict boundaries, right? The boundary is just that we would always look at together, maybe with some people who are interested, we would look at, is this a good new idea? Is this somewhere we should go, where we should take this? Yeah.
And again, this is another hallmark, another distinction about working in a beta environment so we have a socially dense group of people who care about moving this forward, and we have a potentially conflicted or a hot conversation, or that kind of that the idea of social density comes into. Maybe that's why it's good to have all the social technologies that we're talking about here in open source, so that we can live the values as part of developing the body of knowledge going forward. So
yes, and the commercial side is also very important. People can do business with cell structure design, relative targets, OpenSpace Beta, BetaCodex. People can build their businesses on it, which is very important. Also, grossly underestimated. I think we live in a gullible world. Gullible? What's
gullible?
Gullible world, where people are gullible enough to do certification upon certification. Everybody seems to be asphyxiated with certification, or fascinated or flabbergasted by certification, not learning, which is
addicted,
ironic, right? No, everybody has their own weird agile scaling framework from flight levels. So there's a guy here in Germany who created his own agile scaling shitty framework, flight levels, I think it's called. It's utter nonsense. Has no concept. It's just strategic planning revised, mixed up with metric structures. Then there's unfix. Totally, it says leave matrix structures behind, but it's just matrix structures with colors. It's the most futile and annoying state we're in. A gullible world, I would like to call it. Yeah, we don't live in a world of sharing, but of gullibility. And of course, sometimes I think for myself, maybe we shouldn't have gone down the open source road. Maybe we should have just brutally commercialized this, brutalized the heck out of this. And so, because apparently people don't want to learn, don't want to change the world. And this is the invitation that of course, I'm only thinking this in dark hours, right? To myself. I would never tell anything about it.
Well, except the people who are watching here. So now I know a couple of guys who are involved with the flight levels bit, and I am
poor people.
No,
such a ripoff. Maybe even holacracy.
I haven't been in the soup of that, so I haven't drank that Kool-Aid. But I'm here with this. But you're not talking about individuals. I know.
No, I'm talking about the concept and the commercial layout. Yeah. And I think Jürgen Appelo is a great entrepreneur. Apparently, he doesn't distinguish between authoritarianism and democracy. That's why he comes up with stuff like delegation poker and stuff. But those are distinctions to be discussed.
Yeah,
he's not aware. I think those people within those let's call them communities. Yeah, they are blatantly unaware of what they are doing. It was always like this in total quality decades ago, or in strategic
business process or engineering.
All these communities, they ended up being, highly commercialized, becoming their own industrial complex, as Daniel says it. Yes, they all went down this road to total intellectual decline, total ripping off of clients. Let's say loss of any intellectual or moral authority, and of course those are fair business models. So you can earn money with these things, and we, with the BetaCodex community, with all these other concepts that we talked about, we want to go in another direction. We want to make this as vibrant, as open as, we want to make this democratic. And one of the foundations of creating staying away from becoming an industrial complex is open source. It's a guarantor. Regardless of my temper or my ego, which I have, the BetaCodex is independent of that, and that's very important. And I might turn gullible myself tomorrow. Still, the BetaCodex will be open source, and I will not be able to force myself upon people.
Well, I think it takes again, borrowing whatever value. I mean, it takes courage and conviction to be able to say, yes, I want this, but I also want to do something different with it, and to be able to articulate that, and to say, well, I don't feel right calling it this because I think it's something different, but there's enough of a distinction that it's different, but there's enough of a similarity that you want to give credit and acknowledge the inspiration. I think one thing I know that happened, and that this may be, again, when we talk about openness and we talk about the licensing that produced in the Scrum world, there was a well-known lawsuit between Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org, and there was all millions of dollars wasted and thrown at each other and all this kind of garbage. And now you have 3-4 different Scrum organizations trying to live and financially validate their existence, and which causes the industrialized industrial complex, right? That's again the beware of that path, and that's hopefully what we would choose not to do.
I would never blame the creators of those concepts, like Ken Beck or Jeff Sutherland,
Ken Schwaber and Sutherland.
Ken Schwaber. I would never blame them for having the wrong intentions. But what isn't, I think, well enough understood is that once you create these commercial behemoths, and once you opt out of being open source, once you are closed source, and the same thing in a way happened to Beyond Budgeting 15-20 years ago, then there is no single person can be so morally astute or so perfect to keep the movement from decay. That's why it's so clever that Daniel used this name, Agile Industrial Complex, referring to Eisenhower's famous quote, right, talking of the military industrial complex in the United States, which he warned about and which has happened. It's in existence. It has been in existence for decades, of which now the Senate and all these companies and the military and so on, and everybody is part of this. And even the election system has become entrenched by the military industrial complex.
It's a perverse system of...
Exactly. And it's a system. The problem is not the individual senator. I mean, there might be corrupt senators, and that's another thing. But the thing is not the individual president or senator in that story, but that the model is set up in a way that it cannot do differently. If the conditions create this agile industrial complex. And does it take balls sometimes to stay with open source instead of closing it up and earning shitloads of money with cheap trainings? Yes. Because I mean, and this is why I mentioned before, I think this is a gullible era, or an era of gullibility. Sadly, people do not seem so very, in this specific period of time, the post-COVID years, people seem to be way too focused on the commercial side and not too, I mean, how can anybody in the world work on SAFe and with SAFe and selling SAFe? And if you look at the SAFe website, it's full of theft. I mean, they're
throwing everything.
They have principles that they ripped off this and there. There's no proper attribution. And also, I mean, SAFe doesn't work. It doesn't create the client. We talked about this in another episode, right? That a consultant is defined by Alan Weiss as somebody
improving the client condition. Yeah.
And none of these agile concepts is doing it. Not even Scrum is doing that anymore. And we don't give a shit by and large. So that's the trouble we are in. So yeah, open source is the only means. If we are not superhumans, none of us is, and I think open source is the only means to protect innovation and improvement and clients' interest, in a systemic way. All else is hubris, and you become another behemoth of the agile industry.
Openness is the only way to true progress, might we
Yes,
say,
it is, even if it's hard.
even if it's hard. All right, my friend, I will. We're going to land this baby and head over to betacodex.org/live and talk with whoever amongst you here at 9:45 a.m. in the Eastern Time Zone, the U.S., and let's say 3:45 in the in CET at this point, or
Yes.
if you're watching this in the future, whenever it happens to be, but we won't be live at that point. So
Yes, but those who are live, who are in the session live, they shall type the link there in the red line, in the red thing, betacodex.org/live, and we will meet there on Zoom.
all righty,
Right?
see you then.
See you next week.
Yes, absolutely. Bye. And there you go. That was this week's BetaCodex Live. Openness does matter. And as always, thank you for the precious gift of your time and attention. We'll see you next week.